Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where we explore ways to get healthy, wealthy, and wise. With a combination of guest interviews and solo episodes, I hope you will be inspired and motivated to become the best of whatever you are. I'm Elle Russ, #1 best-selling author and subject expert with over a decade of helping thousands of people across the globe. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about free guides, masterclasses, online courses, and more. Enjoy the show. Hi, today I am going to jump into the nitty-gritty of a specific success scenario. And I'll pan the camera out and I'll pan it back in. You'll see how this can relate to your life, possibly your children, and looking at the reasons as to why you may do the things that you do. The example I'm going to give for this is analyzing an all-girls summer camp that I attended for 6 summers. The camp was around for 85 years, very legacy-like, meaning if you were a camper there, likely you came back as a counselor, and maybe you even then sent your daughter there. But let me just get into what this camp was about, and then I'll get into the scenario. So this is an all-girls summer camp, 7 weeks long every summer, and at any given time, maybe there were a maximum of 74 campers. So maybe 68 to 70 every summer. The girls were ages 7 to 16. You didn't have to start at 7. Some started at 8, but those were the ages really allowed. So I went there when I was 8 years old, 9 years old. I went there for 6 summers. And then after you do 1 year of college, the owner lets you come back and be a counselor. So, for example, the year that I came back to be a counselor, out of a staff of 24 counselors, 20 of us had all been campers together. So we all really know a lot of us know what it's like to be on the other side when we come back as a counselor. It's a very interesting perspective to have. A lot of fun. Okay, so camp was around for 85 years, not around any longer. It was also really fun because, of course, there was an all-boys camp 10 minutes away, and they had all-male counselors. So it was fun to go back in the summers, a couple summers during college, and be a counselor and experience that. And that was really, really super, super fun. Okay, so this camp, though, was very strict. I don't mean strict like mean. I just mean strict. It was run on military bugles. We went to sleep with, taps playing on the bugles, and we woke up to revelry. It was like 7 a.m. It was like, oh my God. And you had to wake up and we had to clean the cabin and have inspection every single morning. In fact, we had inspection twice a day, but in the morning, we couldn't have sand in our beds. The inspector checked the square corners in our sheets. We had to sweep. They'd open our drawers to make sure everything was folded. And we had inspection twice a day, morning and afternoon. So it was really strict. We all had uniforms. We had a specific polo shirt we would wear, specific blue, sort of a light blue top, navy bottoms. And yeah, just very, very, we all looked the same. There was absolutely zero electronics at the time, but we were allowed no candy and things like that. I remember one kid tried to sneak in some Jolly Ranchers by cutting open a tennis ball, and she got busted. We also had no electricity in the cabins. So in our actual cabins, we would only have flashlights at night. We also didn't have showers. We bathed in the lake, and we went to the bathroom in outhouses. So basically like 3 toilet seats next to each other above, a hole in the ground with a platform. And it was just like, it was a little, house you went into, an outhouse kind of thing. So it was pretty, basic and kind of rugged and rough, and definitely a lot of quote unquote suffering for a kid. And like, hear me out by this, because you're just not waking up late, having a fun summer like you would imagine. So for the first couple of years, you're like, oh shit, Like, are you kidding me? Like, what? I have to wake up at 7 a.m. every day. Like, why? I just want to sleep. I don't want to go to school. Like, why am I on a schedule? Right. So, very strict. It was sort of like a second, it was like kind of like going to boarding school, military camp. And it was just, it was a really amazing place. We would make a schedule at the beginning of camp. You knew what activities and what time you needed to be. So everything ran on bells, bugles, military bugles. Like I said, even for eating, the military bugle would call us into the mess hall. So, aside from offering sports, this camp offered a lot of sports. It also offered a value system to be rewarded from. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. Let me just talk about the sports. For all of the sports, there were honors, like little felt honors, you could sew on a sweater, like little honors that were made in the shape of whatever. So if you achieved certain heights and skills in certain sports, you would be given an honor. So let's just take tennis, for example. Tennis might have four honors, like four levels within it. So if you're the 8 or 9 year old, maybe the first tennis honor you get that first summer at camp because you're 8 is because, you were able to bounce a ball 10 times upwards and downwards and do like 10 more things tennis wise that were kind of easy. And they give you the first honor. But by the time you're 15, at the end of your sixth or eighth summer there, you might get your fourth tennis honor and built up to that level. And that level has a lot of physical requirements in it, including beating the instructor. You have to beat the counselor in order to get that honor. You have to like play a full match. It's tough, and very few people got that honor. So there's that system within the sports to achieve goals and successes to accomplish. But then there are also these qualities and characteristics that the camp pushed. It valued characteristics like teamwork, helpfulness, stick-to-itiveness, which is essentially perseverance. And the way they rewarded this was two ways. Every Monday during the 7 weeks, there was a council fire, which was just like a big fire. The campers and counselors would gather around, very chill, lovely songs at sunset, um, kind of traditional. During that council fire, that week, all the counselors would get together and kind of judge who would be promoted. Which kids were the ones that exemplified the values of the camp the most? And so let's say they're like, the counselors go, well, from our cabin, we choose Jenny and Betty. They were really great this week. So then at council fire, Jenny and Betty would stand up along with the other people in the camp who had been promoted at the different cabins. And, they would be honored and we'd sing a song to them and all of that. The other element of reward at this camp for characteristics were being elected to camp council, which was considered like the camp government. So you could get promoted every week, but the big money would be at the final council fire at the end of camp, where you would find out, did you make it? Were you chosen for student council? And the younger ones would get something called a flame, and the older ones would get something called a star. And it was such an honor to be elected to camp council by the entire staff. This not necessarily was the end goal of the camp, but it certainly seemed to be like the goal you wanted to reach. So by the time I left, I did get elected to camp council and become a star. And so not everybody achieves it, but it's certainly something while you're there that you're like, ooh, yeah, there's a level I can reach, right? So when you go to council fire every week for the weekly promotions and they call your names, you stand up and, everyone's cheering you on. And when you're a kid and you're like 8 or 9 and 10, you start to get sort of the name of the game, which is like, all right, well, how do I get promoted this week, right? How do I get on camp council, right? So the ultimate goal at the camp, in a way, sort of for some of the campers, maybe not others. Others probably didn't care about it at all. But this is what I saw. I saw two approaches to this, especially in hindsight. I saw the approaches when I was a counselor because I was no longer a camper anymore. And then I also am still in touch with my fellow campers and my fellow counselors and my fellow campy, like my fellow counselors. So I know what they are like as adults now. So it's a really interesting perspective. And this is the way I looked at it. There were two sort of approaches, and not that they are conscious approaches. One was being a rule follower for success, and the other was being a people pleaser for approval to success. Both led to the same success, meaning I saw people get promoted and be in that environment and have both of those characteristics. And I'm kind of a rule follower in this sense. So what I saw was sort of two ways, and then there's sort of a third way, which is like super altruistic, but there's rarely an 8, 9, 10-year-old that's doing this shit because they're like Mother Teresa. You're either people pleasing it or you're doing it straight up to success. I'm going to get into the details of what these mean. And before I do that, what's positive about this camp from a psychological perspective? Their practice of recognizing and promoting children based on these qualities. What's positive about that? So many things. It encourages positive behavior. By rewarding positive behaviors and these actions, you're making it more likely that the children are going to continue to exhibit them year after year and as time goes by. That's a just a like a fundamental principle of operating conditioning. There's also intrinsic motivation. So even though the recognition is kind of initial, like maybe one of the initial motivators, over time, the kids realize that these values are great and they develop this intrinsic motivation to help others, work as a team, right? Be perseverant, all of these qualities. This kind of culture develops social skills, fosters empathy, definitely cooperation and communication, and just it's self-confidence, achievement recognition, sense of accomplishment. And because when you achieve recognition for demonstrating this, like why would that provide a sense of accomplishment? Because it's reinforcing your belief in your ability. So let me just backtrack there. So when you're like achieve recognition for demonstrating these types of behaviors, right? These positive behaviors, and you're going up this like again, the achievement of the thing is a success, the recognition. What that does is it reinforces your belief in your ability and it's continually encouraging you to strive for further achievements. It's a system that also promotes a growth mindset. Why? Because it's focused on effort and improvement. It's highlighting and rewarding specific behaviors combined with a growth mindset because children are learning that yes, their efforts and behaviors can lead to recognition and success, but it 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 also leads to a belief in their kind of capacity for growth. If you don't achieve something, or for example, like you don't get promoted, but then you do something next week and then you do get promoted, or for the first 3 summers, you're never elected to camp council, but then you keep trying and then you get elected. Oh, I see. I did something. I changed the thing. I improved it. It's resilience, persistence. When children are striving to like embody this stuff, that's what they're developing. They're also, learning to overcome challenges and setbacks. It's life skills development. And it's also real world stuff. It's no different being promoted at camp than it is at school or work or elsewhere. There's leadership and responsibility aspects. And the last thing I'll say is just it enhances the atmosphere. It creates a positive culture. You're emphasizing rewarding positive behavior and communications with others. That's a more enjoyable and enriching experience because it's like community belonging. I feel so, so lucky. I think about this camp all the time. It's part of who I am. I don't know that I'd be the woman I am today without it. And I can say that the women who have come out of there are really quite amazing too. So, all right. Um, so I want to talk about two campers that I knew and highlight them. And they're adults now. They're like 40. So they both had different approaches. And again, not necessarily conscious approaches, but different approaches. One was a rule follower for success, and the other was a people pleaser for approval for success. They both achieved the success. They both made student council. They both were promoted a lot. But I want to give a deeper perspective. I also know about the mothers who raised them. So I'll tell you about how I think some of that might have contributed to their approaches. But the rule follower for success, okay, this is more of me when I was a camper too. You're driven by the motivation to achieve success. It's like, I don't care if you think I'm a lovely person or you approve of me or you accept me. I just want the stamp that I got promoted. I want to keep going to the highest level. So in that situation, a rule follower just sort of seizes the thing, seizing the pathway to the goals, the higher status, the increased resources. That's what you see and sees, essentially. You're just going after it. C's and C's. There you go. SEIZE and also SEES. You're driven by a motivation to achieve success versus the people pleaser approach, which is driven by the desire for social approval. Even though there's some approval within someone like me, the rule follower camper, let's say, or this rule follower camper I'm talking about, it's just it's a different motivation. So from an evolutionary standpoint, the rule follower for success approach is kind of an adaptive strategy for a structured environment. It's like, oh, following established rules and norms leads to predictable and stable outcomes. And that would definitely enhance one's chances of success in any kind of structured environment. And then you can look at the rule follower for success as kind of, high competence and confidence. The rule follower success approach is more likely to build the genuine confidence because it's based on competence and mastery. Because as the person is sort of meeting their goals, like self-esteem is reinforced, their self-efficacy is being reinforced, and all of that kind of leads to a cycle of success and confidence over and over. All right, that's the rule follower success. That's more of my type when I was a kid. It's different now that I'm a kid, and I'll talk about this because those things that we did to get promoted are now intrinsic in us, which is the goal of a camp like that. And I have so many good examples of that in a minute have a really great example of that. So the rule follower approach is going to build more genuine confidence. The people pleaser for approval is a different ballgame. Both can reach the same success, but I'm going to talk about one being more sustainable than the other. The people pleaser has more of the rule follower like me has more of an intrinsic motivation, and the people pleaser person has the extrinsic motivation, the external. They're driven by that desire for social approval or to be seen as a good person or to be seen as nice, right? This goes into that people pleaser, No More Mr. Nice Guy book by Dr. Robert Glover. Look him up and Google my name and his. I've interviewed him 3 times on how to not be a people pleaser. And even though the book is written for men, No More Mr. Nice Guy, it's really great for nice girls too. So it's more of an extrinsic motivation. You're driven by that approval, that acceptance. Yeah, you follow the rules to achieve success, but it's more important to be liked and seen as a good person. This appearance that you want from others, the impression. But when I was a kid, I didn't give a shit about that part because I'm a rule follower, success approach person. I just, you know what I mean? I was just a kid trying to get promoted, right? But when you're an adult and you're looking at kids operate, and I've worked with kids for like 15 years of my life, you can sort of see the difference. You can see the one that's doing it because of some sort of insecurity. They're a little bit of a less confident aspect of the extrinsic motivation. They need this thing. The rule follower is more like, I don't need your fucking opinion. I need the success. I just want the outcome. If that makes any sense to you. I hope there's enough of I'm going to get into some more differences here. And by the way, just, I'm still in a text thread with like 8 people from this camp, like 6 of which I've known since I was 8. Just caught up with my counselors a couple months ago, people that were my counselors when I was a camper, and caught up. Actually, one of the campers that I had when I was at the camp is Morgan, who is the co-founder of Primal Kitchen Foods with Mark Sisson. And I was working for Mark before she came along and we accidentally ran into each other. I'm like, hey, wait, I was your counselor. It's a hysterical story. Mark was like, what? You know each other? I'm like, she sat in my lap when she was like 8 years old and I was like 19. She's also a very rule follower type like me. And she also was an amazing camper, also got promoted a lot and was on camp council. She went to the camp as well. So it's like I did it to just succeed, right? You're certainly still getting some approval, but you're just not trying to be seen as a good person, or you don't really care as much about the approval. So let's talk about this evolutionarily, evolution wise. The people pleaser behavior approach is sort of linked in a positive way to alliances, right? Social cohesion. Yeah, cohesion might be a good word. Uh, to be liked and accepted by others is obviously critical for survival in a social group. So providing support, protection, that's evolutionarily how behavior might be linked in terms of the people pleaser in a positive light. But it's also very problematic, the people pleaser approach. And this is why it's problematic, because it's unsustainable. And it's also less effective. I think it's a less enjoyable existence. So this reliance on external validation that the people pleaser approach has, that's going to lead to a fragile sense of self-worth. It could be shattered at any time if you don't get approval. That's the problem with people pleasing. It can lead to anxiety, self-doubt, definitely lower confidence. So that extrinsic, external motivation, right? That can lead to burnout, resentment, especially if you feel like you're constantly trying to please people and you're never getting the reception you want or the approval you want. It can be very exhausting. With the rule follower, it's like more confidence, competence. The approach is built on genuine confidence based on competence and mastery versus the people pleaser for approval because it's reliance on extrinsic motivation, that desire for acceptance, to be seen as a good person or nice. It's not that that can't be positive, but let's compare these approaches. So the rule followers are likely to be definitely more resilient and adaptable. Again, because their confidence is coming from within based on skills and achievements they have. So they're going to navigate challenges more effectively. Their motivation is going to be more aligned with goals and competence and not other people's opinions. But the people pleaser approach, they're going to struggle more with resilience because their confidence is contingent on external factors. And external factors are fucking unpredictable and out of your control. So that makes the people pleaser approach person more vulnerable, not only just to stress, but like less adaptable to change. Definitely, probably less adaptable and receptive of criticism. So let's compare the approaches in terms of outcomes. I think that obviously you're not going to be surprised. I think the rule follower sort of type, it's more sustainable. And that's why the long-term outcome is better. You're going through life building a more solid foundation, which this is maybe a good word to use here. You can leverage that in so many situations moving forward. Long-term career growth, definitely personal satisfaction, better relationships. But for the people pleaser and long-term outcomes, success is, again, it could be short-lived. It's more superficial. It's more fragile. So the people pleaser approach might achieve the goal and the outcome. That need for validation is the thing that's going to hinder that person's development professionally, personally, in the long run. And this is the most important point here, because if we're going to sort of compare these approaches and compare this type of personality, but if we're going to compare this, what might be the most important thing? I think that would be internal satisfaction, right? Doesn't that matter? Just being the person walking around the world. And the rule follower is going to experience greater internal satisfaction and a greater sense of accomplishment. So you might be like, well, I'm a people pleaser and I'm successful, so what does it matter? And I might argue that you could be less satisfied inside than the rule follower type. Why would the rule follower experience greater internal satisfaction and accomplishment? Because their achievements are seen as the result of their hard work and their abilities. And the people pleaser might struggle with that internal satisfaction because their achievements are tied to other people's perceptions. They may not even really feel fulfilled. They might not ever feel truly confident in their abilities. So, because they're always seeking the next validation. So, both of these approaches, sure, they can lead to success. I've seen it happen many times. I'll give an example in a minute. Two campers that were there who are now adults. The people pleasing strategy, that effort, that unconscious way of going about life in terms of success, going about success is more problematic. I do talk about people pleasing in my book, Confident as Fuck, in my masterclass, my course. The people pleaser approach, because of all of the problematic issues there, that can lead to some mental health issues. Now, the rule following approach, right, it's fostering intrinsic motivation. That's sort of more sustainable. All right. So, two girls at camp, known them since they were like 9 years old. Both had different approaches. Both got promoted a lot, were seen as exemplary campers, but one was a people pleaser and one was like me, who was like a rule follower. Now, this is all I'll say. From the perspective of being a counselor, and then now looking even back on that experience of watching these two girls and also knowing their success now. By the way, both are extremely successful. Both are happily married mothers with children, and like they're doing great in life. I will say though, I wonder because the people pleaser approach camper chick, she had a mom who was very critical of her. Um, it, I don't know if I'd go so far as abuse, but I would just say a little bit critical, just like a classic helicoptery kind of thing. And at the time, and critical, like maybe the girl, let's say when she'd be at home, might walk out, her mom be like, are you wearing that? Like just kind of critical. And so I wondered in hindsight if, and then another girl who was also a people pleaser type, her mother had struggled with alcoholism. I wondered if that was a contribution, that people pleaser, keep it nice, don't ruffle feathers, be nice. Oh, my mom's so critical. Just play the part so people like you, so that you're good, so that you don't get yelled at. That is a part of what makes someone a people pleaser. Not to say that you're not going to raise your kids great and they're still not a people pleaser somehow, right? You could be extremely confident and outgoing, have a very shy kid, right? So it's not that you're to blame for this, but just in thinking about raising children, it's interesting because that's what I saw. Now, on the side of the rule follower, very strong mother with a very strong relationship between the mother and daughter, like very close relationship. It makes me think that the rule follower child, and I at least can say from my experience, because I had a strong mother and I went through this camp and I was also getting promoted with other people that were people pleasers. What I'll say as a camper and a counselor is you could tell. The one shitty thing about the people pleasers is they were recognized by everybody in the camp. They were, they certainly got their day in the sunlight. However, when you're a camper, you look at them like goody two shoes. They're the goody two shoes types, right? It's the like, you're fucking doing this just because you want everyone to think you're great. Like, it's almost like naturally, inherently, the kids, you kind of know. As a counselor, it doesn't bother you as much, but you see why the child is sort of doing it. Does that make sense? I hope that's hitting right. Because in life, then, that is the case too. Your boss is seeing it, everyone in the workplace is seeing it. And so, what's funny about the people pleaser in an evolutionary way is even though it kind of is sort of could be part of social cohesion and, you know, getting along with everybody, it is good sometimes to have a nice guy around, a people pleaser, a middleman. These are like the mediators sometimes. They can be in that role. So, there could be, a need for that sort of person sometimes. But in general, it is perceived to be a weakness. My guess is because of looking at someone knowing that their value is based on extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic, inward versus outward. One is more powerful than the other, and one does not depend on anyone else. So, parenting styles, that could be a thing. Relationships with parents, obviously, any kind of childhood stuff. So, anyway, one time, here's an example of how this camp and its culture. Here's an example about how this kind of. So now I'm like in my, let's see, I'm 50 now, but I was in my like already 40s at this point when I was at a picnic with another person from the camp who had been a fellow camper with me. And we hadn't seen each other in a long time, but we're at some sort of reunion thing. We go to this picnic, like in a, like a local park kind of thing, so not like a private house or a backyard. So like a picnic where there's benches and there's like garbage cans and the stuff that's monitored by Parks and Recreation. And maybe there were, I don't know, maybe there were like 40 people. So as the thing's winding down, I notice everyone just is leaving and there's barely anyone there and no one is cleaning up. Like no one's cleaning up. And I'm like, wait, what? So I grabbed a garbage bag and I'm like starting to clean up and throw things in the garbage and all this kind of stuff. And I look over and I see my former fellow camper doing the same thing. And we are the only two people out of the fucking 40 or 50 that were helping. And I looked over at her and I go, hey, you know why we're the only two people doing this? And she's like, why? I go, fucking camp. And she laughed. She totally got it because we were doing it then to get promoted, right? It wasn't necessarily this altruistic, oh, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. We were doing it as a means of success. Oh, follow the rules, be helpful. Okay, great. Got it. That equals getting promoted. That equals, right? So you're doing that math in your head about like what needs to happen. But the whole purpose of that camp, the whole purpose of that conditioning behavior and why it's positive is that now we're adults and we're doing it automatically, inherently, intrinsically, because we feel it's the right thing to do. Because no one's getting fucking promoted at that park. We were the only two people from that camp. It's not like it was a camp event. So that was just so interesting to me. And I remember being like, oh, isn't that funny how it's become second nature, how over time you actually do start to value the things that you don't really understand and have the capacity to value when you're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. I don't know if if I had a fellow people pleaser camper with me, because the fellow camper that was with me is a rule follower like me. So I don't know if there would be a fellow camper that I knew that was a people pleaser if they would have stayed to clean up. Would it have become, it might have become automatic for them. I do believe that. But if no one was watching, would they? Not sure. Maybe it would just have become inherent over practice and time. Either way, it's great if you get the outcome of the behavior. It's a lovelier world, isn't it? So I hope this helps, not only maybe helping you look at how your children are motivated to do something for success, but how you are. And then what is it that you need to change? Do you need to get out of people-pleasing garbage, gain self-esteem and confidence, turn this around? If you do, jump into my confidence masterclass or get my audiobook to Confident as Fuck. If you want to go further, you can always take my awesome ultimate confidence course. It's like 14 hours. Think about these things. These are life changers when you get into them. All right. So think about it. Are you a rule follower approach type of person to success, or are you more of a people pleaser approach type? And again, realizing that both can yield successful outcomes, but my argument being one's more sustainable, more genuine, and has more long-term internal satisfaction to go along with it. All right, reach out to me on social media or through my website if you'd like to say hello. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, I would so appreciate you leaving a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about partner discounts on amazing products, visit ellruss.com/discounts.